Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, tuning up your 8-mile-per-gallon passenger van to start touring again, or else a scrappy upstart, renting a 50-mile-per-gallon vehicle share smart car, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the third Friday of November 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Andres who drove a Mini Cooper Clubman with those two weird rear barn doors, and who was always trying to draw you into his mid-level marketing schemes that involved timeshares in Sarasota, run through a shell corporation in Taiwan. And then old Andres would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. They've just added custom landing pages for musicians. You can now easily create your own music landing page using preset page templates and built-in funnel tools. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you would like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, you can check out my tour page, joepugmusic.com/tour, where there are a bevy of new tour dates posted all around the world from London to Wolf Trap. Or you could find me the first Sunday night every month at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you can become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. If you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, you could still help us out in a couple ways that are entirely free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. It was a pleasure to talk to the Ballroom Thieves. They covered one of my songs years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and I always thought that was a huge compliment that they did that. So it was a pleasure to get to talk to them about their journey so far. 'Cause 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 Our guests this week are an indie folk outfit hailing from New England who have spent the last decade winning over listeners around the nation. Martin Early and Callan Peters are known together creatively as the Ballroom Thieves. They started touring regionally around Boston and then built a following nationally with tens of millions of Spotify streams. They record for Network Records. They've played at Newport Folk Festival and Dell Fest. They've shared the stage with Shaky Graves, Camp, Devotchka, The Head and the Heart, Philip Phillips, and many others. No Depression says their music strikes a balance between darkness and light, and NPR calls them folk darlings. I got a chance to catch up with the Thieves a few weeks ago to hear about their musical journey so far. Martin and Callie of the Ballroom Thieves, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. Your musical paths now are, and your personal paths are intertwined inextricably, but you guys started out in different places growing up. Martin, where did you grow up, and what did music look like in your household?
I grew up in Switzerland in a household with one member who was extremely musical, my dad, who played guitar and wrote songs growing up, and one who is tone deaf, my mom, who like mouths the words to happy birthday because she's embarrassed that people will hear her sing. And yeah, my dad brought a lot of music into our house, and so did my mom through just appreciation and loving music. But my dad managed a bluegrass band in Switzerland back then called the Kruger Brothers, who now live in North Carolina. So I have these vivid memories of being a young kid going to these open air bluegrass festivals in Switzerland, watching the Kruger Brothers play. So that's kind of how I grew up. Yeah,
that's a weird cultural artifact. I wouldn't have expected there to be bluegrass festivals in Switzerland.
Yeah, they weirdly enough, they love bluegrass and like country western, or at least when I was growing up in the 90s, they did. So
I've been over to Europe to play a bit, and it's always like what makes it across the pond culturally is always weird. Like I would finish a set and you'd finish it, and then some European would come up and be like, "This was very good, but can you play some blues songs now?" No, that's not the deal. But did you find that you were getting American music with kind of a twist in that way because it was European, or were you kind of getting mainlined what it really was from your dad?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was getting all kinds of stuff from my dad. Like he was into Garth Brooks and he was into Tom Petty. And so it was all over the map a little bit. I think when he moved to Europe, because he's originally American. So I think when he moved, he kind of, he identified with that Americanness in him. Mm-hmm. And so, it was almost like he took pieces that he didn't want to let go of, and he became more American, quote unquote, when he moved to Switzerland, where he started wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats, because that was like a Swiss person's idea of an American. And so I thought it was really interesting. But yeah, I was getting all kinds of different musical influences, but definitely through the lens of the European culture.
And Callie, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the two of you did not meet at a Swiss bluegrass festival.
So, I wish that was our origin story.
Yeah, so
sadly not.
What did music look like? Where did you grow up, and what did music look like in your household?
I grew up outside of Boston, and I'm the oldest of four kids, and I started playing music. I started playing cello when I was 10, and I think it was probably a pretty random choice, because no one had played music. There was a lot of music appreciation, but no one played an instrument in my family yet, and I was obsessed with it right away. So I think I brought some music into the house, and my siblings all played after me: violin, viola, trumpet, and yeah, it was just like a very musical household for a lot of years.
So did you just get, you said it was a random choice with the cello. Did you just get stuck with it? I remember in band in like eighth grade, one guy missed the day of when they were giving out instruments. So he was stuck with French horn. And, 25 years later, we still make fun of him for playing French horn. A similar thing, like,
Yeah,
was there a cello lying around? Like, why do you think you ended up with that instrument? Because an instrument that you start with is really going to affect the aperture that you end up seeing music through, going forward in life.
definitely. I don't think I wasn't really stuck with it. I definitely picked it. I remember we had a a day where we all got to choose what instrument we were going to play, and it was just the strings. And I don't even think bass was a choice, but I remember knowing I wanted to pick violin, and I already was starting to be like really into it. I would air violin around, and and then when the day came, they demoed all the instruments, and the cello just was special to me, and I picked the cello, and I stuck with that, and never looked back at violin ever again.
It's interesting because you mentioned there's two instruments on either side of it. Bass is obviously marrying rhythm and the melody. The violin's obviously playing melody. Strikes me that cello might be in sort of this kind of orphaned place in the middle, where it might be doing one job one time, the other job another time. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think it'd be interesting to jump into this. Um, how do you think that kind of versatility from that instrument has affected you as a songwriter?
Hmm. You're right. It does jump around. I think it has a larger range than the other instruments, which could be the reason there's so much jumping. It's the playing fifths on a cello, double stops, is so powerful. And so I think that because of the size of the instrument, it's definitely the low endy bass rhythmic thing that you might be missing from violin. But it goes so high as well, and the higher the cello part, the more eerie it becomes. And I think it has definitely influenced my songwriting now. There's such a range, and in orchestra and in scores, there's so much going on with the cello and the other instruments around it that I think my writing definitely has a orchestral feeling to it.
Do you write on it?
On cello?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have found that the six strings of a guitar are much more fun to write around.
Sure.
But I don't play guitar at all, so I have to depend on Martin wanting to have a accompanying guitar part to my songs. But I have written on cello, and it makes the songs leave the folk realm pretty quickly.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's a good thing. Folk
I
can
think so
be,
too. Yeah.
can be a little monotonal sometimes. That's its drawback. So I got a little ahead of us there. Let's jump back just a little. Both of you have these, very different upbringings, and couldn't be more different milieus. My understanding is Martin, the band had already been formed, and Callie joined a little bit later. Can you kind of describe the genesis of the band, and then Callie's joining, and how those dynamics worked?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I started the band with a friend of mine in just after college. He played drums for us, and then a cello player joined shortly after that. And yeah, we kind of played together for about a year and a half, 2 years. And we were doing a lot of bar gigs around Boston, and then just we're busking too. And then we started playing these college shows through this thing called the NACA circuit.
I remember that. Yes, I
Yeah.
haven't heard that referenced in like 10 years, but I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still as popular as it was. I don't know if it was popular back then, but it was a cool way to kind of make a little bit of money and then build tours around these college dates that kind of funded the rest of the tour. And
Yeah,
So
a
that's
little bit is the key phrase.
exactly.
But at that time, it would be like, it seemed like a lot of money because I remember, I can't believe you just opened like a door in my brain, something I haven't thought about in years, but I can remember being like 25 years old. It's like, man, if you can get hooked up with the rep from Naka, then you can make like $650 a gig. And that would be like your anchor.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you'd go to these conferences and they'd book you like, 20 dates and each of them pays about $650. And you're like, oh my God, this is it. We've made it.
Yes. I mean, it's because then all the other gigs on the tour are coffee shops for $125 tips and a free sandwich, so
Exactly.
$650 is legit,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of how we started. And then at one point our cello player decided that she had to move on. She was doing lessons that she was teaching in Boston, so she needed to be home and didn't want to tour as much. And also we weren't making a lot of money, so it was just kind of like a decision that she had to make. And at that point, we thought the cello was just this perfect magical instrument, and so we were looking for another cello player, and that's when Callie showed up at an open mic. And there's this great open mic in Boston called the Lizard Lounge Open Mic. And it happens every Monday night. There's a judge. It's like a competition-based thing. And even, touring artists that are playing in Boston stop in every now and then. It's always just a really high caliber open mic and really a supportive community. And so our drummer, Devin, at the time was judging the open mic. And Callie and her previous band, Flightless Buttress, were in the open mic, and they ended up winning that week's open mic. And then we kind of asked her to join, and I reached out first on Facebook, which was just a bad idea because she didn't respond to my request. I sent her a nice note about how we would be interested in chatting with her, and she never got back to me. So then,
at which point you wrote back, well, F you then. I don't want to be in a band with anyone who named a band Flightless Buttress anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Then we decided we'd have our manager reach out because that seems really official, and sure enough, the trap worked.
Yeah, it's funny, but the only problem was the manager's email address was like Ballroom Thieves manager at Gmail.
Yeah.
Is that how you remember it, Callie?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I used to get a lot of bad inquiries after an open mic for people looking for free work, basically. And I had decided not too long before that I was all done doing free sessions, and it's time for me to start getting paid for what I do. And so it was right in that time where I had a new boundary, so I was not going to respond to this Facebook message. But
that's a very important thing. Songwriters run into this less, but if you're talented enough on the musician side, I think musicians run into this a lot, especially in that early stage where it's just like, just come over to my apartment, take 15 minutes to cut, some cello on this. What's the big deal to you? And you're kind of like, well, in the day and age of Spotify, the big deal to me is I could cut something on this song and then it could rack up 7.5 million Spotify streams, and I don't see anything from it.
Right.
It's an important boundary to put down.
Right. I mean, honestly, more often it was just bad songs from creepy dudes.
Yeah.
And every now and then you'd meet somebody who was really serious and had a unique thing going on, and they couldn't pay you, but you did it anyway, just in case you made a friend and a musical acquaintance. But it was time for that boundary for sure. So
what you're saying is Martin was broke, but not creepy.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah. still checks out.
Story.
Checks out. That's that'll be the Twitter bio going forward. Well, that's cool. I mean, when you started playing together, do you remember a moment when the sound that you were making together kind of sounded like more than the sum of its parts, when it sounded like it could be a thing?
Yeah, a couple, I think, along the way. When I first joined the band, I remember being in our drummer's bedroom at a rehearsal. And it was, I was new to singing. I didn't want to sing lead, but I was not really new to making harmonies. And so we tried to sing a little together and create some new harmonies for an unreleased, unrehearsed song, I think. And it just was very effortless. And I think we all kind of looked up like, this sounds kind of good. I think we can sing together. So that was a moment. I remember another moment when Martin and I started writing songs together instead of just one person coming up with part of a song and the other person quietly finishing it. And we very much did not join up in person for those, but we decided to try to write an actual song together in the same room. And it was Canary, our song Canary. And that was another special moment where there was just, I always describe like a hum happening when music is working and people are working together. It can be a solo on an instrument, or it could be multiple people working together. But when the hum comes, it's just this beautiful, good vibration. And that was happening with an acoustic guitar and my voice and our songwriting together. It definitely sounded like something to look into.
It's funny the way that you put that, the word hum. It makes me think about when there was this whole era, it was kind of the earlier music business era, when there'd be like A&R people who didn't play an instrument and didn't write songs, but they were very successful A&R people. And I think the reason that they were is because they had an ability that maybe songwriters or musicians themselves didn't have an ability because they were too close to the music to hear when something hummed or it didn't hum. And they could just hear it and they could put their finger on it and say, out of the 100 people I've heard play at Hotel Cafe, these three hum. And I really know what you're talking about when you say that. But even though I know what you're talking about, it still remains elusive to describe what it is. And it still remains elusive. I can miss it when somebody has a hum and you find out years later because, millions of people end up liking it.
Yep.
Yeah, that kind of plays into, when we're recording an album, you always gravitate towards certain songs and you're like, this is the one, this is a great one. People are going to love this one. And then you send it to the label or whatever, and then they pick out a different song that's like, this is the one actually. And then it goes out on Spotify or something. And then the people decide, actually, it's this other song that's the one.
And that's the correct deal. The label never picks the right song. I'm sorry. They never do. It's always like some political machination of, someone at the label, it can't be this song because they picked this song. And
do you think the artist ever picks the right song?
Sometimes, but it's not 100%. I think it's probably a batting average of like 300 or 400. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's surprisingly less than you would think. But the audience always picks the right song, man.
They do. They all like get together and they decide what sounds good, and then they make it. They make it work.
It's kind of like a Reddit, right? And like they upvote it. You can't. No matter how much money a label or anyone puts behind a song, you cannot in politics, there's grassroots and then they call it astroturfing when, basically a political operation pays to make it look like it's grassroots. You can't astroturf in music because you can't make people just text their friend a song when they don't love the song.
Right. Yeah. I like that. It's very organic in that way.
It is. And you can't. Politics, you can kind of astroturf a little bit. Other businesses, maybe you can astroturf a little bit. Music, people are not going to freaking listen to songs that they don't like. They just refuse to do it.
Yep. Are you describing the problem with the music industry right now? This is it. You just got it with one sentence.
I think it's great though, because now that Spotify exists, it's all in front of us, both for your own music. You can see what people are choosing. And also with other people, you can just look and you can see that project is working. I mean, unless something's been on a crazy playlist, then you can figure that out. But you can see what people gravitate towards. Do you guys ever, I don't know if I should be ashamed to admit this at all. But no, now that I think about it, I'm not ashamed. I do look at what people are listening to on Spotify to decide what I'm going to play at concerts. because sometimes it really surprises me. I assume that people want to hear a certain song off a certain album. No one streams that song. And then some random song off an old album that's never been on a playlist gets streamed a bunch. So I put it into the set. Have you guys ever used that as a tool?
Yes and no. That's really funny you say that. I think you should be proud that you do that, because that means that all of those songs that you wouldn't have thought that you wanted to play or that people liked, you still want to play and are proud of. And I don't think we can say the same thing. We are going through a time right now where we change our bands every album, kind of. Okay. And I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what we sound like and how to play that the best way. And so it's like leaps and bounds between albums to us. So, you know, 3 albums ago, there's songs on there that show up on our top 5 that we will never play again.
Never play. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to think about them. We can't believe they even exist. I mean, maybe that's extreme and that's just my opinion, but I don't want to play those songs.
It's funny. I come from a very different school of thought where my live show that I've been doing for 10 or 15 years, I look at it as the same show that I'm trying to perfect and whittle down. And God willing, if I have another 25 years to do this, that it'll still be the same show. You guys are approaching it in a very different way. How do you manage then audience expectations for coming to a show?
It's been a challenge in our minds. I don't know if it actually looks too challenging. We give the audience some of the songs that we know they want, and we reimagine them so that we're happy too. And then we play a chunk of things that those things are for us. And I think what could be happening is we love to play those new things so much that our audience is coming along with us, which we're very grateful for.
Yeah, I also think there is some overlap in that it's a Venn diagram, right? So like there are some songs that people want to hear that we also want to play. It's not like it's right. Totally mutually exclusive. So yeah, there's definitely some of those too. But yeah, I think it's kind of like what Callie's saying, where if you can convince the audience that you are excited about playing this song, then they'll be excited too.
Yes.
We're like their guide to our music, which is, I think, the way it should be, instead of the other way around, being dictated by our old catalog and what they want and need.
Sure. Well, I think it depends on the artist and the format that you're training people to want. Like before he died a few years ago, like when I was going to a Billy Joe Shaver show, I knew what I was asking to see, and I wanted to hear Old Chunk of Coal, and I wanted to hear Star of My Heart, and I knew to a certain degree what the show was going to be. I wouldn't expect the same thing of going to, everyone knows what a Dylan show is going to be at this point, and that is he's not going to be on an acoustic guitar playing Blowing in the Wind. He's going to be playing a janky keyboard, playing some Seaside from 1987, and like that is what it is. So there is like a certain degree of like kind of training an audience to know like, hey, this is the bargain that you're coming in for, and hopefully you know what you're in for. Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. The Thieves are trying to navigate the tricky world between art and marketing. And for many of us who arrived just interested in the art part, the marketing can feel very vapid. And that's because it's a means to an end, whereas the art is an end in and of itself. So there's a poem that does a masterful job with wordplay that reminds us just how thoroughly marketing terminology has taken over our cultural landscape, probably for the worse. It's grimly hilarious. It's entitled Portmanteaurism by Nick Lance. Would it make a difference to say we suffered from affluenza in those days? Could we blame Reaganomics, advertainment, the turducken, and televangelism we swallowed by the sporkful, all that brunch and jazzercise, frappuccinos we guzzled on the SeaTac tarmac, sexcellent celebutants we ogled with camcorders while our Imagineers simulcast the adminstrivia of our Alarmageddon across the glocal village? Would it help to say that we misunderestimated the effects of frankenfood and mutagenic smog, to speculate that amid all of our infornography and anticipantment, some chrysotunity slumbered unnoticed in a roadside motel? Does it count for nothing that we are now willing to admit that the animatronic monster slouching across the soundstage of our tragicomic docu-soap was only a distraction? Because now, for all our gerrymandering, the anecdata won't line up for us. When we saw those contrails cleaving the sky above us, we couldn't make out their beginning or their end. What, in those long hours of ash, could our apple teenies tell us of good or of evil? You guys, heading into COVID, dare I say, you got kind of hosed. It seemed like to me. My understanding is like right before COVID happened, were you in some like large car accident? And then like when COVID did come out, you had an album, a beautiful album, bullet in the chamber, ready to go, merchandise printed up, everything ready to go. And then it all comes crashing down. If it's not too traumatizing for you, can you guys kind of describe that period of your lives and the band heading right into COVID?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty devastating, to be honest. Yeah, we had some really good momentum going, and we had been working a lot of these markets all across the country for a long time. 5, 6, 7, 8 years in some cases. And we were finally getting to the place where we were selling out in advance, and we were selling out kind of these 200 to 300, maybe 500 cap rooms, depending on the market. And, it felt like finally all this hard work we were seeing it pay off rather than just like having to tell ourselves that it's going to work. And so, so then we got on this tour and everything was going pretty well. And like 3 shows in, we were driving through Wyoming on I-80, which is one of the worst highways in the country. And we got in this massive pileup. It was like a national news, I think it was like 80. I don't know. It was a lot of vehicles.
I think it was like 140 on one side and 80 on the other. There were 2 spontaneous accidents on both sides of the highway at the same time.
Yeah,
of course.
And it was it was traumatizing because some people didn't make it through that accident, and we were stuck in Rawlins, Wyoming for 3 days while they were clearing the wreckage. So both sides of the highway were closed and we had to cancel shows. And then finally we got back on the road and, flew up to Seattle, and then we were essentially just following the pandemic. You know, we were in Seattle when right as things were kind of bubbling over there, and then it was like we would leave a place and that place would shut down like 2 days later, and then we ended up having to cancel the rest of the leg of the tour, and and then we got home and just stayed at home for 2.5 years. And probably the worst part was this phone call we had with our manager a couple weeks later, where he essentially just told us, you know what, you have to forget about this record. You have to move on. It sucks. It like, you know, it happened, but this record's never going to get the consideration or the time that it deserved. And you have to move on and make the next one.
There's obviously no guidebook for how to navigate a pandemic in 2020, whatever. Mm-hmm. But that conversation was so unexpected. I don't know. I'd love to talk to our manager someday about how he realized that was true before us, and how he was going to tell us, because we did not see that coming. I think we both thought we were not optimistic by any means about the pandemic. I think we both thought we would be inside for at least a couple seasons, mm-hmm. Not a couple weeks. So we knew that things would be canceled and we would have to rebook, mm-hmm. and restart. But I think we thought we would pick up where we left off. And obviously after 2 years and a missed album and the world completely changing in that time, there was no picking up. But he knew that, and he had to tell us. And yeah, that was the worst part, where it was all true. It all really happened. Our most expensive tour to date and our best tour was not going to happen. Mm-hmm. The momentum was gone. The album is gone. And now we're going to be at home.
And like you were saying, you know, we had sunk a lot of money into making the record and into printing the merch and into all of the marketing, the promotion. We were in the hole, and we were going to, you know, recoup that money by touring. And then the touring didn't happen. So yeah, it was a disaster.
Yeah. Now that I release my own records now, which is great because it allows me to make more money, but it also, that transfers 100% of the risk onto me. So this year I had an album coming out, and about 6 weeks before we announced it and put it on sale, you know, my wife was just kind of like, why are you've been irritable lately? Like, what's the matter with you? And what was the matter with me is I spent 18 months not only doing the creative work of putting the album together, but paying all the musicians, paying mastering, paying mixing, getting vinyl made, which is just tens of thousands of dollars, publicist, all this stuff. So I have all this money out into the world. And for like a 2-month period before this goes on sale, I'm like this animal that has armor on its back that I've like rolled onto my back, and my soft belly that's completely vulnerable, I can just be slayed at that point. Because if something happens and I can't put that on sale or anything goes down, I'm bankrupt at that point, because I'm completely leveraged. There's no more borrowing money. There's no more. It's just like Joe's out of the music business if I can't recoup this money right now. So it's I've thought about you guys, because to me, it was you and BJ from American Aquarium. You guys, very similar thing where you're leveraged in a really vulnerable position. And right when you're in that vulnerable position, you get hit with a generational, you know, punch.
Yeah, it's almost funny now, you know?
Almost.
Does that really happen?
Yeah, really. Well, so what, I guess, you know, I'm just there, you know, waxing poetic about it, but I guess it leads to the question of, why didn't you quit? Like, I think a lot of people would just at that point hold it and quit. And what has kept you going? What made you keep the faith?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I don't think there's any shame in quitting after something like that.
Sure.
And we had some shakeup. Like our drummer, who was in the band since the beginning, decided that was it. You know, he was like, I'm going to do something else. It's time to move on. And so then we kind of faced that same decision, and we definitely thought about it. but one of the things that we realized when we were stuck at home is just how much we missed the road and how much we wanted to be back on the road and meeting people and seeing the same old friends that we've met, that we've hung out with over the years. And yeah, even just the mundane parts of being in a van or loading in and out. And yeah, we just missed it. It was kind of something that we really needed.
I think it also felt wrong to have this album taken from us and then not do what we do, which is normally put an album out, tour it, at some point grow away from it, get a little tired of it, and then try again with another one. And we didn't get a chance to get tired of it, but we certainly grew away from it. And so we wanted to just do it again. And stopping everything instead of trying one more and then one more felt premature.
I think there was also this kind of challenge of, we had been a trio for a long time, and then suddenly it was just the two of us. And so I think there was this challenge of like, well, what do we want this to be like now? If it's just the two of us, which it was, what do we want our songs to sound like? And how do we want to craft the band around us? And what instruments are we looking for? And what kind of players do we want on the recording? And, what's the sound? And so I think that challenge was really fun. And then having the time to sit at home and to demo out songs and to really work on stuff rather than work piecemeal and then go back on the road. And then, it was kind of a new, like a fresh exercise, I guess. And so I thought that was really, it lent itself well towards, kind of hunkering down and spending a bunch of time working on a new album.
Well, first we were depressed and watched news for like 6 months.
Yeah, right.
Then we did it.
After that.
Don't worry, I drank, I drank, 3 boxes of Costco box wine for 4 months. So it happens to the best of us. What does that new process look like when the two of you have a day to write? Is it the two of you, waking up, having a cup of coffee and breakfast together and locking yourself in a room to work together? Is it you retreating to different parts of the house or the studio to work and then come together? What is the most effective part of your creative process these days?
It comes in pieces still. It's the same as it was before. We definitely start apart most often. And we come together and have that cup of coffee in the morning and then work. When we're getting to the end of a writing period, we will maybe have a meeting and write down the 10 possible songs that could be finished soon, and then realize how close we are on so many and get excited and sit down all day and finish as many as we can. And sometimes it works and we finish like 5 songs in a day.
Wow.
Sometimes it doesn't, and we learn a cover because it just wasn't the day for it. And sometimes we go many weeks without doing any of that, and then we feel rushed, and that's kind of inspiring as well. So it's all different each time.
Man, it's funny that you would mention that when things aren't working, you just go to learn a new cover thing. I'd never really done that before, and I've just in the last couple of years have really turned to that. If I'm knocking my head against a wall for 45 minutes in the writing room, I just say, fuck it. And I go and I'm like, well, I know the song Thunder Road, but why don't I learn all of the lyrics to it and learn the ins and outs of it? And it's funny. I thought I started doing it at first because it's like, well, it might be nice to have these for a live show to bust it out. But that is not the usefulness of it. The usefulness of it is making it enjoyable for yourself in the moment to play music when it's not enjoyable during the process.
That's exactly
Totally.
it. Yeah, you're not able to write something. You're wondering, what is music? Is it even a thing? This is ridiculous. And then you play someone else's beautiful song and you remember music is amazing and you can do it too.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's a big talking point on sports radio is something along the lines of, what would be the most pleasurable sports achievement to actually do yourself? Would it be a slam dunk? Would it be hitting a home run? Would it be, throwing a touchdown pass? What would it be? To me, getting to play someone else's song by yourself and really get good at it and listen to it, it's like being Tom Brady throwing a touchdown pass. It's like LeBron throwing down a dunk. Like you get a little bit of what it feels like for that artist to actually do it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's one of those nice feelings because it usually is easy because it's already been done. Like you don't have to do the hard work. You just have to imagine it again. And yeah, I agree. It's really interesting to, you're kind of putting yourself in that artist's shoes and you get to pretend to be that person for a little while.
But you're only putting yourself in like the best part of, you're not like putting it in their shoes.
Yeah.
You had to go to like rehab or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Or like their dud album.
Yeah.
You're going to pick their
Exactly.
best song.
It's you're not stepping into Neil Young trans territory or what was that record of his that he made to get out of a contract. Now I'm going to get a bunch of mean emails about how trans I suck. So have you guys been back out on the road to support this one yet? And how does it feel? And if you have been out, how does it feel?
Yeah, we've been out. We went out west in the spring, and then we did some festival dates in the summer. And then we just got back the other day from an East Coast and Midwest run for 3 weeks. We did some supporting shows in there too. But yeah, it's hard. It's been really hard, to be honest. There's like ticket sales are down across the board. And like Callie was saying before, to a certain extent, we imagined falsely that we'd be able to kind of pick up where we left off. Mm-hmm. And that just hasn't been the case. And so it feels more like we have to rebuild again to get back to the place where we were. And so keeping morale high is a struggle as a result, because we're just, we were used to higher ticket sales and bigger crowds. And then now we're coming back and, a lot of people are buying tickets on the day of the show. And so you right. don't really, you can't plan ahead. And you're making the guarantee probably not going to hit points on any of these shows. And so financially it becomes a real like game of Tetris to figure out how exactly to make it work long term.
It feels like we kind of graduated from that years ago and we're back in it, like having a tour where there's no money, so there's no extra fun or comfort.
Right.
So now we're like 2+ years older, right. And we've gone backwards here. Like this is uncomfortable. Right
now, your manager's listening to this podcast and he's going, "What the? Stop saying this stuff out loud." But in fairness, particularly for club and theater touring, ticket sales are down across the board, particularly on the coasts. It's because some people are still worried about COVID in a serious way. It's also because there's just a glutted market of stuff to go out and see. And I just don't, it is one of those deals where it's a little bit scary, selling those tickets, but at the same time, I was talking to my agent, earlier this year, and it's just, I was saying, I don't know any way to make this come back besides if you build it, they will come. Like that's the only thing. We just got to put our heads down right now and show up at the club dates. And I remember during the Delta wave. So this is like this time last year. This is like September of 21. Ticket sales were so devastated during that time. They've since recovered from them, but I actually went to go settle up at a club and ticket sales were so bad that it triggered something in the contract. I'd never had this happen before, but it was like, you don't even get the guarantee. Like there was some way for them to like claw back, 40% of the money. And that's when I was like, look, it's bad enough to have to tour to just get the guarantees and no bonus, but I'm not going on any tours where, not even a guarantee comes through. Luckily, that hasn't happened again, and things have back up again. But there have been some scary moments out there.
Yeah,
yeah, totally. Yeah, we had that weird summer of fun right before that, and everyone was like, "All right, we're good." And then then it all came crashing back
We
down.
needed that summer of fun, I think.
Everyone did.
But I think it's really, really interesting because when you're out on the road, one of the things that we felt was like, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be on the road. But I had a similar conversation with our agent where he said something pretty much like what yours did, where it's like the only way through is to just keep doing it and keep building it again. Because if you stop now, it's not going to come back. You can't
Exactly.
can't get people to come out by posting things on Instagram. It doesn't work that way. So
that's exactly it. And if bands just stop touring and going to clubs, there's not going to be a clamor from people for that to come back again. They'll just forget that it ever happened and they'll get deeper into TikTok. And I know I sound like an old man when I say that, but really, like, it is a precarious situation where it's not as if people don't have other things to do, and we need to maintain a culture of people going to see music live. It's kind of our job right now to do that. It's for us, obviously, but it's for musicians that come after us. Like, we have to keep this flame burning, because if we don't, it could go out in a sort of way,
Yeah.
That's you saying that has made me realize how frustrated I am that it's our job to keep the flame burning.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like musicians have enough to do, and then now we have to like entice people to come to live music. That's
Sure.
I hadn't really thought about it.
Well, I can understand the bitter feeling that would engender, but I don't know. I don't know why music makes so much money in general, and it's so hard for the creative types to get their hands on it. But it just always seems like it's always been the case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I always come back to that Gillian Welch song, "Everything is Free Now." And she goes, "Everything is free now." Someone hit the big score. They found out we're going to do it anyway, even if it doesn't pay. And I think that's a little bit to it. Like, we're all just in love with this thing, and we're going to keep on damn doing it. Even if the numbers go down, I'm still gonna fucking be there, man.
Yep.
So it to a certain degree, maybe that's how the dynamic works, because we'll still be there, because you can count on us. There is a little bit you can be taken for granted, and maybe that's just life. I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, I'm more bitter about needing to do the social media part.
Yeah.
Like, because to me, the music part, I love doing that, and I love playing in front of people or at home, and writing and recording especially is one of my favorite things in the world.
Yeah.
So I love all of that whole world. But then to have to do that and have to have that be my job, and then also have to document everything like I'm some documentarian and keep up with the trends. And now I'm sounding like an old man, but yeah, like that's the part where I'm kind of bitter. Like, man, haven't we done enough? Do we really need to also start a TikTok and get,
Well, no, you don't. But this is what I've kind of come to peace with, which is, I used to feel like I had to do everything: Twitter, TikTok, all this stuff. And then I just had this realization of like, okay, I'm bad at Twitter because I don't like doing snarky stuff. I don't like being snarky, and that's the medium of Twitter. And then I'm not going to do TikTok because I'm not going to be the approaching 40, dad on TikTok. Sorry, not going to do it. No offense to all the 40-year-old dads on TikTok, but I'm just not going to do it. But there are these aren't the only mediums. So I find like, okay, I can communicate with people via podcast, and I can communicate with people via a newsletter that I do. And like, so I've tried to, it's like, yeah, I don't have the TikTok account, but I've really tried to invest in these other areas where you can communicate with people. I think you can have fun with it, and it doesn't have to be like a freaking stupid TikTok challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so challenging to find where you belong in it, though, when it's not natural.
Yes, absolutely.
I love photography, and so I've loved doing most of our social media because it kind of used to revolve around photography. You'd share one beautiful photo and say some stuff, and then boom, people come to your show. And now it's different.
Yes.
There's no art on TikTok.
No.
I think you can create it and find it. And I do think that there's something amazing about these little basically films that young people are making. And I guess I would call that art. It's very impressive. But I don't really have an interest in it. but I don't really have a choice. I have to find some place to stick out so that we can get some people to our shows, because
Yes.
the people our age, they're not coming out right now. It's like the young people on TikTok, they're seeing something fresh there, and then they are going to the shows, and that's amazing. And I'm envious and impressed by some of these younger artists that got their start on TikTok, and now it's working. It's actually translating to ticket sales. But they did find their way, and I'm so frustrated that I have to now find my way too in that way, like you're saying.
Yeah, but easy come, easy go. With that type of stuff. It's really, there really is no substitute to. I'm finding a level of support from fans over the last 3 or 4 years where it's like, okay, maybe social media numbers don't look crazy in different categories, but when I go out, there's been no substitute for people knowing me for 10 to 15 years, and
That's true.
Town for 10 to 15 years, and it is a deep and abiding connection, and people look out for me like big time, or in my audience, and I just think that is, what's the expression? When something comes to you quickly, sometimes that support is a mile wide and an inch deep. And maybe some of those people will be smart, keep it a mile wide and dig deeper. And maybe at that point, they're having a mile wide and a mile deep, and good for them. That's when you become a legend. But I don't know. I don't think all support is created equally.
You're right. And I definitely have fallen into this kind of despair, watching social media numbers and watching ticket sales and just not knowing what's happening, and the whole music industry is floating and hasn't put its feet down firmly anywhere yet. So I finding comfort in your thoughts.
It's almost like having all that data is such a good thing on one hand, and then it's such a weird thing on the other hand, because you're like, how do we actually interpret all this stuff? Like, some of it is really great to know where your audience is, what they're listening to, all that kind of stuff, who these people are, who they identify as. But then with some of it, you're like, well, why did I get 1,000 likes on this thing and 200 on this? And, it doesn't make any sense. So then you're just kind of stuck trying stuff. But now we're getting into social media more than like being a band.
Well, we're just finishing it, and that's, it's how it goes. I mean, it's part of the cost of getting to do something that we love is, there's a bummer to every job, man,
Totally.
It's just a bummer to every job. Well, listen, thanks so much for coming on to the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you guys, and I hope the touring for the rest of the year goes swimmingly.
Yeah,
Thank you
likewise.
so much.
Yeah.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. The Ballroom Thieves' latest album is entitled Clouds, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.